Fall is all about cozy comforts, and with Hero Bread, you can enjoy all your favorites and still hit your health goals. From breakfast bagels and meal prepped enchiladas to mouth-watering burgers and cheesy noodles. You won't believe Hero Bread's options have 0 to 5 grams net carbs and are high fiber from the taste and texture. And right now, Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code FALL25 at checkout. That's FALL25 at HERO.co. All figures are per serving of Hero Bread. Contains 2 to 18 grams of fat per serving. See the product nutrition panels on hero.co for more information.
Welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming podcast series, where we profile those who have overcome or are in the process of overcoming a life topic. We have 3 objectives with this podcast series. One, we want everyone to know that no matter what life topic you are experiencing, there are others who have either experienced what you're going through or are at least willing to help you through any life topic. Our second objective is to help you understand and help you work into the fact that there are multiple solutions to any life topic that you're experiencing. The third objective is if you're experiencing a life topic that might be a result of a decision you made earlier in life, that if you had a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with the critical thinking skills to be able to assess all of the facts and factors to make a more informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I am with my wife and business partner, Marty. The Cooper Culture is sponsoring this podcast series. Today we feature Kathy Kasten for the 3rd episode, and she will be talking to us about pivoting, or how do you adjust life experiences, some of which are devastating. You have to reevaluate what you're doing and maybe define a new path. Marty, what are some things that our listeners can take away from this podcast?
Ron, as I was listening to Kathy's story and all the pivots that she had to make, think about this. You're dealing with alpacas, and then all of a sudden your life changes and you're dealing with ice cream. And how she adjusted to each pivot and accepted it and made the most of it. It's a great story and one that we all could learn from.
Marty, it's a very astute observation that, yes, Kathy is one person who evaluated life, their marriage, and, I'm not sure I want to continue on the road that we're on. She experienced her mom's death, which was just devastating. But with a positive attitude, she came through it. We can come through it as well. Kathy is very articulate also in describing that we want to be acutely aware of the possibility that when we are experiencing something devastating, we might just want to withdraw from life. I'm not sure that is defined as clinical depression, but there are times that we just want to withdraw from life because we're uncertain how things are going to be and where we go next, how we put things together to maybe reorient our life to take on a new life. Let's listen together, Marty, to Kathy's story and see what we can learn from her experience and how we might help others who are in, sometimes we call it, an extremely deep funk, but it could be a legitimate mourning, different factors of life, but helping people overcome whatever is a devastating down point in their life. Kathy, thank you much for joining us again. As our listeners might be aware, your first episode was talking about the very sudden passing of your mother and how that was so devastating to you. The irony is that you spoke of her the day before her passing and gave her just a huge, well-deserved tribute. And then the next day, you had to go through a very different life. Your second podcast was about a legacy, that we are all building a legacy as we are here, and that legacy is one that others can hopefully live with and live by. But today, Kathy, I know that you have had to pivot. Some people are using that term, but let's just say you have necessarily had to go through a life transition with the fact that your mom is no longer here and you took on a bit of mom's role with your dad, and you've necessarily had to change your life. And Kathy, I wonder if you would explain to our listeners just what all you had to go through. But it's also a matter of when you have to necessarily change your life and maybe refocus. How did you do that, and how might you help someone else do that?
Well, this is a topic I'm really excited to talk about, Ron, and thanks for having me on again today. I think that to start this, I would say pivots are those moments in our lives when we really hit a crossroad and we have to make a choice. And I think a lot of times they're things that we choose. For instance, when we leave college, where are we going to go to work, or if we're going to marry, who are we going to marry? Sometimes there are things we don't choose, and those moments can be harder and even more powerful sometimes than the ones we get to choose. So I was thinking back about my life and realizing I've had quite a few major pivots, and those probably helped prepare me for the one with Mom. It was a chance to practice maybe on a little lesser field and then to be able to be prepared when a bigger, harder one came. When I got out of college, I went into corporate America right away with the degree that I had. And I was in corporate America for just under 5 years, and I was being fast-tracked in the large company. It was one of the biggest insurance companies in the country. And I was being fast-tracked. I was doing a lot of work. I was in charge of 1,200 employee newsletter. I was doing events. I was teaching customer service training, just all kinds of things. So I was ready to take a step into another role. They were promoting me, and I was looking at potentially another very large promotion very quickly. And there came a point just before that 5-year period where my husband and I stopped and said, do we want to go this direction? Because he was also in corporate America and also doing very well. And we were getting to a point where we were coming home at night, figuring out who was going to make the peanut butter sandwich and really dropping into bed. And I thought, I married my high school sweetheart. I don't want us to live our life as roommates. And I remember driving through a neighborhood with a lot of very nice homes and noticing no one was in the yard and it didn't look like anyone was home. And I thought, I don't know if that's the life for us. For some people, that might be a great fit. For us, it just didn't seem to be. We had just purchased a home. The thought of me stepping out of corporate America at that point maybe meant we were going to have to sell our home and go back into an apartment. And we just decided, we thought that was the right path for us. And so I decided to walk away from corporate life. I think the final decision for that was I was in a meeting with a man that everybody in our company really admired and looked up to. He had spent his whole life with this company. And he was a very private person, and I remember sitting in his office one day, and we were having a one-on-one conversation, and he said to me, I would never do this again. And I was shocked. I was ready to fall out of my chair because I said to him, do you realize most of the people sitting in this company want to be you? And I said, if you don't mind me asking, why do you say that? And he said, well, because my kids didn't know me, my wife didn't have time with me. And 5 years after I leave this company, most people probably won't remember my name. And that really struck me. Not to say my husband worked in a corporation his whole life and had a wonderful experience. So it's not to say there's anything wrong with corporate America. I think it was about thinking through what the priorities for our life would be. So we decided to have my husband stay in his corporate job, and I left to be home and to really kind of refocus on what direction the Lord might take us next. And that was maybe the first of many big pivots. I ended up, we had a child a couple of years later, and we homeschooled her, which was something that I had never planned to do. And on top of that, she ended up writing a number of books as a child, which was something brand new to our family. So we ended up traveling the country, and I was trying to help her navigate the book industry, which I knew nothing about. Then we ended up, because we were homeschooling and I wanted to bring in some additional income and teach some great life values, we moved to a hobby farm. And at that point, we took alpacas on as a business. And those who are listening may laugh. I grew up in the suburbs, so I didn't have any experience as a ranch hand or as a farm girl. My mom grew up on a farm, but I didn't have that background. So I had an awful lot to learn. I loved animals, and that's what I knew. I didn't even know what an alpaca was before we started down that road. Loved that industry. Really enjoyed my time in it. We were doing tours. We were going to events. We were selling products of the alpacas. It was just a wonderful time, and I dearly loved it. And I thought, okay, this is where we are. This is where we're going to stay. We have this lovely hobby farm. We love our life. And then we had another one of those pivots come. My husband's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she was a widow. And we had to decide what to do next for her. My husband was her primary overseer to help her with her income and all of those things. And we had a deep heart-to-heart, and we decided we needed to move closer to her so that my husband could help to take care of her at a higher level. That was a really difficult transition. We loved what we did. I remember being in tears pretty heavily for a while because the thought of leaving something that I loved so much was really difficult. But we knew it was the right decision. We knew that it was important to take care of her. And so we sold the hobby farm and we moved closer to her. And then I thought, what am I going to do with myself now that I can't do the business that I had been in? And so we bought an ice cream parlor. And again, I had no background in food, but I understood business and consumers and customers and, how to interact with a team. So we jumped into the ice cream parlor and really had a wonderful time. We had a wonderful staff. We loved the community. And again, I thought, okay, maybe this is where the Lord has taken me. And this is something that I can do to serve people and to really glorify God in the process. But then I got quite sick to the point I wasn't sure how long I would be alive. And that forced me again to come to another pivot where I had to think about it wasn't logical or reasonable for me to be able to continue to oversee the parlor at the level that I had for the last number of years. And so then we had to make another choice, and we sold the ice cream parlor, realizing that I could not continue it at that level. And then I realized it was time to open up a leadership business because throughout my entire life, the Lord has over and over again exposed me to leadership opportunities, and the journey I've taken really gave me a chance to experience life in corporate world and through my husband as well, and also what it was like to be on the entrepreneurial small business side of the world. So that was kind of a wonderful perspective to have with clients, to have seen both parts of that play out. So now we're up to Lioncrest Leadership, which is my current business, and this is where the biggest pivot of all came, and we talked about that in the first episode. I had the opportunity to do this keynote presentation. I recognized my mother. The presentation was called Living Your Legacy, and then a day later she died. That probably was the hardest transition of all of them, as we've talked about, because of her support of me, but also I had really begun to set up my business in a strong capacity. I was getting asked for keynotes. I was getting asked to do trainings. There were a lot of people scheduling interviews with me, and literally a day later, after the last keynote I had done, I had to start undoing all of those. So we take about 8 weeks or so to grieve Mom's loss. She was handling all of the finances, so stepping in to try and help my dad navigate his grief, to look at finances, to do funeral preparations. They were serving on a nonprofit board for veterans and emergency services people. They're trying to build a museum, and that was about to launch its first incubator space when she died. So stepping in to try and assist my father and the board to navigate, since she had been one of the directors, on the board, one of the main people. Those were all pieces I had to adjust into my life. After about 2 months, I came up for air just a tiny bit and said, how do I keep my business from falling apart in the midst of all this? Just started to reschedule some events and activities, and then COVID hit, which stripped all of those activities because most of them were in-person events or trainings. So I had to pivot again. as I was continuing to work with my father, and that included thinking about how do I serve people when I can't be out publicly with them. And so that took me to a place of looking at online coaching and online course creation and online master classes to be able to try and still serve the people that I wanted to help. So that's kind of a really quick overview of a whole lot of pivots in my life.
Kathy, for the person who feels they are in a part of life not a whole lot different than where you were with your mom, they may be feeling something like, gosh, I just had something so devastating happen to me. I feel like I've been sucker punched. It's like I've had the wind knocked out of me, and I will necessarily have to change things. How would you help that person reestablish themselves? And I think I'm asking Kathy in the context that, yep, you used to be an ice cream parlor maid, if I could say that just very lightly, but you determined, no, that's not where life satisfaction is. How would you help that person help determine, I don't know whether you'd call it a purpose or something, that I'm having to take a very deep look into myself to determine what is going to be fulfilling in life?
Boy, there's a couple of great questions in there. I think, the first one I would say is, and we talked about this a little bit already, but you have to have time to grieve when you go through a really hard time in your life. So if this is a pivot point where someone is dealing with a loss or grief, you have to give yourself permission to do that. Another thing that I would say is I'm a big believer that actions can change emotions. And so sometimes I was acting when I didn't feel like acting. There were days I wanted to just go shut the door and never come out, close the business, end everything. I mean, I think we all go through those moments. And those are the times when you have to have thought through what's the bigger purpose for me in this? Why am I doing it? And that allows you then to sometimes act when your emotions maybe aren't ready to catch up. And later, my emotions would be really glad I had done it. But it would just be as an example, I had 2 live trainings in February that I almost canceled that were both for college student groups. And I decided to do them because I knew it was something that Mom would have been really happy if I had done. And then I believed very much it was important for them. And so doing it was actually a healing balm for me to recognize I still had purpose here, even though Mom's purpose and time were done. I think that was really powerful. So if you're grieving, grieve and take time to grieve, but also take steps forward. And I think another thing that you were asking, Ron, is how do we determine what our purpose is?
Right on.
My general statement with that really is, for me personally, I always think about whatever I do needs to glorify God and benefit people. And that, for me, comes through leadership and connecting with other people and legacy. Those are things that I'm very passionate about. But I think you try things. You take little steps. As we talked about, I think legacy is one step at a time, every day at a time. And taking a little step and trying something and then being aware of what happens in that moment. Some of the things that I have gifts in, I didn't even know I had gifts in. God took me on those paths, sometimes kicking and screaming. And I would discover, wow, I love this, and I didn't know I loved this. And there were other things that I thought I loved that I would try and discover, what, this just isn't my spot, this isn't my niche. But the only way you get to that point is to actually try it. When I'm coaching my clients, a lot of times what I find is they get to these crossroads and they get paralyzed by the what ifs. And so they don't take a step. Well, as long as you stay in the what if stage, you're never going to have the answer that you want to have. You have to step out and try something. And, you don't have to take a huge step, but take a little step. And that will tell you pretty quickly whether you're on the right road or the wrong road. And I think as a Christian, I'm just constantly praying for the Lord to open my eyes to where He wants me to serve, to who He wants me to serve, to how He wants me to serve, and being receptive to not having it all figured out in my own head, that I'm going to have a plan, but it's a tentative plan. Does that help?
It does. Let me ask you as well, Kathy, that as a Christian, addressing particularly those who are faith-based now, was there an aspect of your life and the pivot that you took inventory of, or you assessed your spiritual gifts, and it sounds as if you did something like that, and you went in a direction and said, well, these are my spiritual gifts, I'll try this. And what I'm addressing, Kathy, is it sounds as if in your life, in the life of a person, you may try different things. And as long as what you're doing does not violate God's precepts, you may not be headed in the right direction or the correct direction in terms of being in His perfect will, where He may direct you, let's just use the term, He may redirect you by taking a 20-degree course difference. But I think what you're saying, Kathy, and correct me if this is not what you're saying, just move out and take action, and God will redirect your path if what you're doing is not wholly life-satisfying. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes. I think I've heard this described as the upper story and the lower story sometimes, and I think that we have to always remember, I love it's just a secular saying, but the bloom where you're planted, I really think there's a lot of biblical truth to that. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 tells us that the Lord's going to direct our paths if we just trust Him. And so I look at it and say, could I serve people and witness my faith to them when I was in the ice cream parlor? Yes. Could I serve people and witness to them when I had alpacas? Yes. Could I serve people and witness to them when I was in corporate America? Yes. And we don't know who it is that the Lord wants us to interact with, whether it's for a day, for a moment, or for a lifetime. We just don't know that. And so I welcome whatever opportunities we have and recognize when I get up in the morning until I go to bed that night, my job is to love people and to share God's message with them, whenever I can. And also, He made every human being that's on the earth, and so they all have gifts that He's given them. As we can help them to celebrate those gifts and recognize those gifts, it really opens up joy in their lives, which is a wonderful balm to them too, and a gift from the Lord, and I want them to experience that. So I don't think it's so much about the occupation that we have. I think it's a lot more about the heart behind the occupation, if that makes sense.
It does.
Right. Kathy, I would say that, you talked about the time you just wanted to go behind the door, shut it, and not come out. And, at that time, you're really hurting. So to the person that has the same feeling, would you say just go ahead and open the door and go out there and do it, even though you're hurting, you don't feel like it, because once you do something for someone else, that makes you feel better?
Yes, there's definitely some truth to that. I will say, I do think there's a time and a place to weep and to grieve. Mm-hmm. And I took some of those moments, and I still take them sometimes, to be honest. You don't know what, and I know we talked about this a little bit, you don't know what's going to be a trigger. So I recognize I don't want to suppress that, and I don't want to tell people don't feel it. You have to feel it to get through it. You have to give yourself permission to be in pain, to walk through that. You have to then think about what's on the other side. And I like to use the illustration of a rainbow after a storm. The pain is real. That chapter of my life is changed. It's over with my mother. I cannot go back and reopen it. She's not coming back. She's happily settled in heaven, and I'm happy for her. So I had to recognize, yes, I'm going to grieve, and I need time to do that, and I should do it. But also, what about the chapters in my life? My book is not done yet. I need to still think about what I do. So if you need a day to take off to grieve, you do that. But then you take steps forward besides that and make sure that you're building in some forward movement and some service of others so that we don't become too self-pitying and because what happens is when we're shut down, we potentially are denying other people in our lives an opportunity to be loved and cared for with the gifts we have, right? We've put them on the shelf for a little while. And so I think there's a balance to be had there, and I don't know if that helps answer that question, Marty.
Yes, it did, and I appreciate that, and I know that when people are hurting, they don't feel like getting out. Whether it's you went through the death of your mom, but just normal everyday things that can stop a person from wanting to get out. Just get out and do it. Do the best you can just to go help someone else is what I was saying.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's so true. And one of the biggest mistakes I feel like we sometimes make in this culture, we're a big feeling culture, and I love feelings. I think they're important, but we should not allow our feelings to dictate our life because they can flop us all over the place. If you think about how many times you maybe have changed your favorite ice cream or your favorite whatever, I mean, we're constantly changing what we feel, and if we're going to flop from thing to thing to thing, we're never going to be able to settle down long enough to really experience deep roots and meaningful joy and purpose. So I'm finding in my own life, when I act in accord with what I believe the scripture says, then the feelings come around. So even if I'm grieving, as an example, when I went to train with the college students, the engineering students that I worked with, I maybe didn't feel like going there that day as much as, normally I would. But I'll tell you, I loved the experience. I loved working with the students, and I felt so good when I came home because I had made a difference for them, that it was a very healing balm. And I think that that's the piece that's really important to hold on to, too, is yes, grieve, but also share those gifts, and God's going to give back to you as well. I'm not sure who got more out of that training, the students or me.
Kathy, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think one other thing you're saying, Kathy, is choose to engage in a person's life. Yes, whenever devastation occurs, yes, you're going to have whatever feelings you have, but if we choose to engage effectively with people, we will understand what they're going through. We'll be able to empathize with them. But I know some people are devastated to the point where inactivity, if they're left isolated, can take a very detrimental effect. And most people, I actually do not want to be isolated, albeit they may feel like they want to at the time, but very few people function best when they're isolated. And I'll put that in the context that God created each one of us to have a relationship. But any thoughts you have on that, Kathy?
Yeah, so this is a great point you brought up. I think it's important when we're in deep struggle, whether that's a loss or a big change in our life, to think, I mean, it's an intentional decision. I have the choice to spend the rest of my life, drinking my sorrows away, or whatever option, I may be burying myself in clutter. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do to express that sorrow that are very harmful over time. And I have a choice to stay there and really waste the gifts I have and also find no more joy, that my joy is done, this is it, I'm not going to have any more. Or to start to look around at the things that are still a part of my life. For instance, had I shut down and gone in the closet, I would miss all the opportunities with my grandchildren. I really love. So what a loss that would be for me and for them, that we wouldn't have that time and those memories together. So some things that helped me to think forward, and they helped my father too, I think. We talked about, as a family, what do we do to move forward? How do we want people to remember us in their lives? How do we think we can help? And I would say, too, surrounding yourself, and this is kind of a different topic, but surrounding yourself with people who won't let you stay there is really important in the grief. And so I would not want to spend all day, every day with everyone else who's grieving all the time. I need to find people that are saying, here's another step, here's another possibility. Have you thought about, hey, have you gone out today? Those kind of things. I need people like that in my life to encourage me to take those steps. And I also found one of the things that I did was to send out an email to a bunch of close friends, family, acquaintances that I really valued their opinion. And I said, what do you think I do well? And that was a question I asked at one point in my life. And that was super helpful for me, because sometimes our gifts that we're given are so natural for us that we assume everybody has them. You know, they seem so easy. Well, everybody does that or can do that. Well, that's not always the case. And I got back some surprising answers that were pretty continuous across the board that I had not thought of as a gift that I possessed. And so that was very helpful to get that input from some other people who could look from the outside and tell me what they were seeing in a way that maybe I wasn't able to do because of the emotional cloudiness that I brought to that thought. So I know it's tempting to stay there. I just want to say, when you do not serve other people with the gifts you have, everybody suffers, not just you, but the people around you that you don't shine for. It's such a gift to be able to walk into those gifts and strengths that you have and have a fulfilled life. I miss my mother. I will miss my mother the rest of my life. But I feel so thankful that every day I get up and serve. If this is my last day, I'm grateful for what the Lord has brought in my life, and I'm really appreciative to have the opportunity for things like this podcast.
Kathy, I think you have just helped us segue into the next podcast topic, and that is, when you are surrounded with people who are like-minded, like values, those people want to help you advance. Those type people want to help you identify with your life. And when you have surrounded yourself with people like that, those people have your best interest, best welfare in mind, and they're not going to, if I can use the term, allow you to be stagnant in your life, that they know the Lord has created you for a very definite purpose, and sometimes it's a matter of affirming or maybe defining what your purpose is in life. Kathy, I think our listeners will want to look forward to the next episode where, if you would choose to do so, you can talk to us about accountability partners.
I would love that. That sounds wonderful.
Kathy, thank you very much again for sharing from the heart. And you've had some experiences that our listeners are going to be very interested in learning from and advancing themselves and being able to work through various situations in their life based on your experience. You've helped a lot of people to be able to pivot to finding a life purpose. So, Kathy, thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
What pivots have you made in life? Whatever the reason, we're interested in engaging with you to learn what you've experienced, and equally important, how did you overcome? How did you work through whatever was occurring in your life that you needed to change, overcome? Whether you call it a pivot, a transition, whatever it is, that term you put to it, let's engage and let us know how you identified it, the fact that you need to change. Was it the fact that you're no longer experiencing, or perhaps never have experienced, a real fulfillment with what you're doing in life? And from that, you know that you needed to make a life change? Was it a matter of you defining a new purpose in life, that you had entered a new chapter? You've had new experiences. You've had new learning, new degree, anything such as that was the genesis of you making a life pivot? Let us know. In Kathy's experience, she had the loss of the mom to contend with, and that was a major part of her life. But she also reevaluated her life, and does she want to continue the path she's on and have the lifestyle she has? There are some of us who go through life work experience, and after a while we realize that we'll never be sorry for not spending more time at work. As Kathy's boss experienced, my contribution to this company is probably going to be totally forgotten about within a few years of my leaving. And so when we go through a life experience like that, we learn just what the priorities are, what the values are in life. And the younger we are, it seems we put an emphasis on our career, the climbing the corporate ladder, in going through these kinds of things, and then the more life experience we get, we learn that there are other values in life. So how do we pivot, and how can we help someone make a life pivot? Is it a matter of defining, refining a life purpose? Very curious what you have experienced and how you can help somebody go through a life-defining moment to where they are transitioning to something different in life. Kathy also explained the importance of relationships. Marty and I have a digital course where we discuss relationships from the context of dating, leading to marriage, into romance, through long periods of being married. The importance of this is the relationships, and how can you identify people, how can you learn people to where we can develop a very trustful relationship and communicate well, communicate with a connected relationship. When we have that kind of relationship with others, we can live, we have learned, a more contented life, and that may or may not be compatible with climbing the proverbial corporate ladder. Let us know your experience. We would like to make the relationship course available to you. Let us know where you are. Let us know your experiences. Call us at 410-586-1875 or email us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, @thecooperculture.com. Again, let us know your experiences. We want to know what has worked for you, what has not worked. Let's share with each other. And as Kathy explained, let's engage and be willing to work with others who might, after a life experience, get into a deep funk and just at least temporarily withdraw from life. We want to develop relationships with people such that we can identify that, we can develop a very trusting relationship and have a genuine desire of the heart that we care enough that we want to help others. So let's learn from each other's experience. Let's share and engage with each other, and let's reach out to advance other people. We look forward to working with you.